And I think too, like changing direction, stuff like that. And like I would train paramedics, EMTs. I would train them off of this kind of this closed loop system called the Ooda Loop. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that.
Nope.
It's kind of like Fruit Loops, but it's
closed
Ooda Loop. But basically, it stands for observe. So like, what are you observing, right? Like, what do you see? And we usually try to break it down that way. So like, what did you see when you walked into that house? Tell me. Okay, orient. So orientation is like your education, your values, all that stuff. You're orienting to what you see. So you're seeing like, okay, how am I going to apply that? And then the next one is decide. You have to decide on that. So you base it off of what you see, your experience, all the other stuff that goes into it. Then you have to make a decision of, hey, what did you decide? And then you do an action. So OODA Loop stands for observe, orient, decide, and act. And it's kind of this closed loop system. But when I'm training people, I kind of break down, it's like, hey, what did you see? And go through that process. Hey, what made you decide this? And they go back and be like, well, my paramedic instructor said this, or my EMT, or I thought this, I saw this call, so that's why I did that. That's why I decided that action. Okay, and then we can break it down and really work on it. And it's kind of a process I use of like, oh, did I do something? Did I see something and made a decision, but I weren't actually looking for the right things, right? It kind of gives me ability to backtrack the call, but also for my students too, to be like, oh, this is what I made that decision, right? Because, you know, you're going to make the decision, but I want to know the why from it. And I kind of have them walk back of, hey, you did this action. You know, what made you decide to do that action? Okay, was it, you know, experience? Was it previous calls? Did you heard someone say, oh, I always do this? And you're like, well, that's got to be true, right? And then that way we correct a lot of stuff because believe it or not, you're going to hear a lot of stories of everyone doing completely correct, but they don't tell you all the mistakes. So they're going to be like, well, this person did it this way, and that worked out really well for them. But they didn't actually tell you all the other things too. And so we kind of work through that whole experience, but also just helps them for when they leave that they can use the same process of like, how can I always reevaluate myself? And I kind of break it off in those 4 steps. So